Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a video about my problems with the 2005 format. Now, we've covered a few different decks from the 2005 format on the channel, but it's not a format that we've really dove into like 2004 or 2008, and that's something in the upcoming year we'll probably try to change because I actually think the 2005 format is a lot of fun. There's a lot of variety of decks. I think a lot of different decks can do well in that format, but it's also a format that has quite a few issues in my opinion. And the first is the format can feel very swingy. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of cards in the format that are very heavy swing cards. Or decks that feel like they can get very absurd starts if they have a little bit of luck. Examples of this are going to be decks, and we'll just go and bring it up here. Like, and this once again we're on PTCG archive here, and I think one of the crazy things is how it just goes to show how many different decks are actually viable in this format. And I think at the time, the format felt very tilted towards Metacham. Like, Metacham was probably the best deck in the format going into Worlds in 2005. And I think that's largely because the format was, for two reasons. One, it felt like the format was largely undiscovered still. And two, I'll give three reasons actually. Two, a lot of the better players gravitated towards playing Metacham. Players like Jason Klaczynski and Cena all played Metacham, for example. And then three, players just really didn't know how to play that matchup. And I felt like a lot of players would play decks and they're like, oh, I should beat Metacham because I'm playing 4 Desert Ruins, so that should beat this all EX deck. And that's not how the matchup works at all. If your deck has a really bad matchup against Metacham, throwing 4 Desert Ruins into it is not going to make your deck have a very good matchup against Metacham. So I felt like just it was very heavily favored towards Metacham, but as the format continued to evolve and players play a wider variety of decks and they're more willing to play different kinds of decks, Metacham started dropping off. And I think another point to that was I think probably 2 of the best decks in the format are going to be Nidoqueen, that Adam Caparelli and Jeremy Moran and Pablo came up with, and that has an incredibly good Metacham matchup. And the other is going to be the Dragtrode deck from 2005, my Dragtrode list from 2005 that I put on the channel. Now, once again, I can't take a ton of credit for that because essentially I took a lot of Alex Brosario's innovations for 2006 and then just retooled it for 2005, but I think it is a much more refined Dragtrode list than you see here. And I would say even this list they have on PTCG Archive is far more refined than what you actually would have seen in 2005. Like, this is so much better than I think what you'd see in a lot of 2005, because a lot of the Dragtrode list in 2005 only played 2 Rocket Sneasel EX, and it relied very heavily on Dark Dragonite being an effective attacker. And that makes, to be honest with you, that does make a lot of sense, especially since Dark Dragonite is a single prize 120 HP Pokemon that you can Brinies back. And I think, to be honest with you, there's variations of the deck that you very easily could make Dark Dragonite the primary attacker of the deck. But we're getting a little off topic here. But getting back into it, the format can feel very swingy. There's certain decks, like let's say Metacham, for example, where they can get some very crazy, Jirachi, Swoop, Wally's, turn 1 Metacham sort of things. Or I'm sorry, turn 2, I don't think Wally's on the first turn. Yeah, because it counts as evolving it. I don't think Wally's on the first turn, I could be wrong on that. I actually haven't played turn 2 Metacham in a while. But it feels very swingy. It's like, oh, if you're playing like Ludicargo, for example, and they get that turn 1 Metacham, you feel very locked out of that game. And then other things like, let's find it here. So you've got some of the different turn 2 decks. Sharpedo's not as bad. We'll profile that one on the channel coming up here. Vileplume's another one I played against Nino, I think earlier today or this week. And I was playing a deck that I'm like, okay, Vileplume, I should be able to do decent against that. I think he goes first, gets a turn 1 Vileplume EX with Grass Energy under it. There's just literally nothing I could do. He locked out half my hand before I even had a chance to draw. And that's just how stupid the format can be sometimes. Is that incredibly likely with the deck? No, but it's certainly something the deck can pull off. If you get that Jirachi Swoop, Rare Candy Vileplume, it happens, for sure. But here is probably one of the best examples of it, is just that Zap Turn Dose deck. Sometimes it's very, very hard to come back from playing. If your opponent goes first, they have that Voltorb or Electric Start. They get that extra Lightning Energy in play. They use that Recharge, and then they just drop that turn 2 Zapdos. They're hitting you for turn 2 50 or 70. That can be exceptionally hard for decks to play back against. Or decks like ZRE, where if they just really, really get going on you, you're really probably not going to come back in those games. And that's, like I said, it feels very, very, very swinging. But going along with that, and probably my biggest complaint about the format in general, is it really feels like you can see the whole game play out in front of you after about a turn or two. And I always remember like the original Sherlock Holmes movie where, or the original Robert Downey Jr., the first Sherlock Holmes movie, where they would do a fight scene and the entire fight would play through Sherlock Holmes's head, and you'd see exactly what he was going to do, exactly what the other guy was going to do, and you'd see how the fight would end, and then it rewinds back in time, and then the fight plays out. And that's kind of how the 2005 format feels. Is it feels like you can see exactly how the prize trades are going to go, and exactly how the turns are going to go, and you can basically, from a couple of turns into the game, you know exactly how the game's going to play out. And there's very little you can do to impact that. Cards, and you'll see in this format, for example, there's far fewer copies of Rocket's Admin played in 2005 than in 2006, because a lot of decks like that play Pidgeot usually don't play a counter to Pidgeot, and you can't really deal with Pidgeot on the bench. So yeah, you can Rocket's Admin your opponent down to a lower hand size, but if they have Quick Search, you're really not going to lock them out of the game. So if you have like Nidoqueen versus Nidoqueen, for example, you can go Rocket's Admin, put you at 3, but they have the 3 cards to work with plus their Quick Search to get themselves back in the game. It's very, very, very hard to lock an opponent out of a game. It's kind of like playing Vaporeon EX in like 2006 or 2007. 4 cards is just too many cards a lot of times to really lock an opponent out of a game. Or even Lookers. Like, people get really high on Lookers in like 2009, 2010, but 5 cards, it does not disrupt your opponent. That is just you're giving your opponent just way too many cards to come back into a game. 5 cards is just way too many, and that's kind of what it feels like in this format. And there is some exceptions to that, like with Battle Frontier, where, okay, I play a Battle Frontier deck, so maybe I can lock my opponent out of Pidgeot and Rocket's Admin them, and maybe they'll miss something. But at the same time, too, it feels like a lot of times players will build up boards where even if you are able to admin them, they still have the resources they need on the field. So it's very, very hard to lock players out of the game. And the other thing is there's a lot of flippy cards. And like we talked about with decks where it feels like they can get if they have some luck, they can get just absurd starts. A lot of those decks and cards in general, you see like a lot of Pokemon reversals, energy removal 2s, that can be just incredibly impactful. And at times, that can be very frustrating, because I'm okay. I think those are good cards for the game, and we've talked about in the past how cards like Pokemon Reversal and Energy Removal 2 have this risk versus reward ratio when playing them, where it's like, okay, you flip coin, if heads you get a great effect, if tails you get nothing. So A, is it worth playing the card in your deck, or is it better to just run a middle of the road sort of card? And going along with that too, how hard do I want to go? If I don't have a Pokemon Reversal in my hand, do I Rocket's Admin myself down to 3 cards just hoping to hit that reversal? Okay, what happens if I hit it? What happens if I don't? What happens if I get heads? What happens if I get tails? And there's a lot of risk reward that goes into some of those decisions that I don't think players fully appreciate. But at the same time, too, I think there's also situations where players just don't even, they just kind of, Pokemon reversal. Oh, that's cool. I got heads. And they don't do some of that risk reward ratios. They just get really lucky. And that can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating to have cards like Pokemon Reversal and Super Scoop Up be so incredibly impactful in this format. More impactful than I feel like they are in other formats. But just the kind of flippiness and some of the absurd luck some of the decks can get are very frustrating. And then just feeling like how the game is going to play out after a couple of turns is also very frustrating, because it doesn't feel like you can have that same impact on the game that you can in other formats like 2006. And even formats like 2007, which can be very frustrating without hand disruption, there's still a lot of like crazy little cards like Absolute X and things that can really change how game plays out. And I just don't feel like you get as many of those in 2005. So to wrap it up here, the pros of the format is there's some really fun matchups. There's a wide variety of decks that can do well. And generally, I feel the format is highly undiscovered. I think there's a lot of really crazy, cool, and fun rogue decks that can do very well that people haven't discovered yet. And I think that can be very exciting from a playing and from a deck building standpoint. On the opposite side of that, just the absurdness of some decks if they get a little bit of luck, the heavy impact coin flip cards have, and just that general feeling that after a couple of turns, you basically know how the game is going to play out, or at least very heavily feels that way, are a lot of the negative effects of the 2005 format. So overall, I think the format it's a good format. It's a fun format to play. But generally, when I'm looking to play games, I usually slant towards 2004 or 2006, because I think those take kind of the fun aspects of 2005 and they eliminate some of the problems that 2005 has. But if you haven't played a whole lot of 2005, I really recommend you do. Personally, once again, I think the best decks in the format are probably Nidoqueen and then the Dragtro deck that we covered on the channel. Those are by far probably the best two. But there is a lot of decks that can do well in the right meta and with the right matchups. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.